Hello again everybody, my name is Peter Knight and this is the third of our 4 sessions on geomorphology in the Regional Land Systems module. In this session we're going to be looking at sediment transfer through a case study of debris flux through one particular environment in one particular land system. The case study we're going to be looking at is the ice marginal landscape at the edge of the Greenland ice sheet. Now, a lot of geomorphology is about processes of denudation, erosion, weathering, entrainment, transport and deposition. In other words, it's about the creation and transport of debris and the deposition of that debris as sediment. A lot of landforms are basically holes in the ground where material is being removed, hills, which are the gaps between the areas where material is being removed, packets of sediment in transport, or packets of sediment, piles of sediment, that have been deposited. Not all of geomorphology can be explained in those ways, but if you think through the landforms that you're familiar with, a lot of them will fall into one or more of those categories. Now, we can think of that in different ways at global and local scales to try to make sense of our system there. So you're familiar with this regular cartoon that I use for you with the Earth's surface, the shallow marine environment and the deeper marine environment. Now, erosion and deposition occur on the Earth's surface and in the shallow and in the deep marine environments. All sorts of different things are happening in all sorts of different places throughout this system. But broadly speaking, on a global scale, we can think of the terrestrial environment as being a source of sediment. And that sediment is transferred on the grand scale, and the ocean, both the shallow marine and the deep marine environments, become sinks for that sediment derived from the terrestrial environment. If we look at that locally, we can see it in a lot more detail. At a local scale, for example, our example we're going to be using today of the ice marginal land system, we can think of some local source of sediment. In our example, it's going to be the glacier, for example. The glacier produces sediment which is transferred, or debris which is transferred, and is deposited as sediment in a local sink, or we might think of that as more of a temporary storage area on the timescale that we're considering. Over the course of time, the material in this sink can be reworked, remobilized, it can be eroded, entrained, put into transport again, and then deposited further down the system. So this might be the ice marginal moraine, this might be a distal proglacial lake, and we have another local temporary storage or sink. Over the course of time, the environment changes, processes change, things move on, and we may again have erosion, transport, and then deposition into another local sink. And so we have various steps or stages, and an important thing to think about in this kind of setup is the connectivity between the different stages in this geomorphic cycle. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this session. Sediment transfer in general, connectivity between different parts of that global system, and specifically we're going to be exploring that through the case study of one particular step in this process. So what we're going to be looking at today is the ice marginal land system and sediment transfer through that ice marginal environment. So basically we have a glacier, we have an ice margin, we have the glacial environment, and we have the proglacial environment. We can talk about the proximal or the distal proglacial environment, close to the glacier or further from the glacier. And we're going to be looking at an environment where we have an ice marginal moraine, which is a convenient temporary storage location for us to look at. So we're going to be looking at sediment or debris coming from the glacier into local proximal storage, and then thinking about how the connectivity within that system allows debris to then be transferred further down the system. So this is what we're going to be looking at for most of this session.